They called it Miller's Hollow, a sleepy stretch of farmland on the outskirts of Lincoln County, where time moved slower, and everyone still waved when they passed. It wasn't much to look at, just rolling fields, an old church, and a dozen weather-beaten homes sitting on land that had been in families for generations. The people that didn't have much, but what they had was theirs, earned through hard work, sweat, and memories that ran deep as the soil. Then one spring morning, everything changed. Trucks rolled in. Not the kind with dirt on the tires or hay in the back, but the kind with polished chrome logos and contractors in white helmets. They came with clipboards, blueprints, and a confidence that made the villagers' stomachs twist. At first, the folks thought it was some mistake. But when the first survey stakes were driven into their pasture, when bulldozers tore through the wildflowers their kids used to pick, reality hit like a hammer. A company called Clearwater Development had bought the land, or so they claimed. 96 luxury homes, a private clubhouse, and a manicured golf course were about to rise right on top of the village's ancestral soil. Old man Carl Jensen, whose great-grandfather had fought in Korea and raised cattle on that land his whole life, took his rusted pickup down to the county office to protest. They told him the paperwork was clean, that the homeowners association had every right, that there was nothing anyone could do. He came home broken. When word spread, so did the anger. Neighbors gathered on porches, passing around copies of the supposed deed, each name on it unfamiliar. The signatures looked forged, the language cold and corporate. But Clearwater had the lawyers, the money, and the permits. The villagers had calloused hands and hope. By midsummer, construction was in full swing. Concrete foundations poured over land where family dogs were buried, where wedding photos had been taken beneath oak trees now ripped from the earth. The sound of hammers replaced the sound of crickets. That's when the road reapers rolled through town. They weren't the kind of men who blended in. Matte black Harleys, leather vests, and faces carved by time and weather. They came for fuel and coffee at Benny's Diner off Route 12, same place the villagers gathered most mornings to talk about their losses. The club president, a man known only as Ranger, noticed the tension. He saw the tired faces, the anger in their eyes, the defeat in their posture. He asked Benny what was going on. Benny told him. And that night, while the moon hung low and the engines cooled outside the diner, Ranger gathered his brothers around. They took everything from those people. He said, voice low, steady. And they're counting on nobody standing up for them. I think they miscalculated. No one asked if it was their business. In the road reapers, wrong was wrong. Over the next few weeks, the bikers made quiet visits. They talked to the villagers, walked the land, gathered every scrap of information they could find. Ranger had a background most didn't know about. He'd served in the Marines before the club, and he'd seen corruption in every corner of the world. But this stealing from poor families in the name of profit, this was personal. One night, while others slept, Ranger sat at Carl Jensen's kitchen table. The old man's hands trembled as he passed a stack of dusty papers to him. Deeds, titles, tax receipts. My granddad said never sell this land, Carl whispered. He said as long as we hold this paper, this land holds us. Ranger studied it for a long time, then smiled faintly. Carl, I think your granddad was smarter than their lawyers. The reapers spent the next month riding back and forth between towns, visiting courthouses, archives, and county registrars. What they found was a mess, a web of bribes, fake signatures, and fraudulent transfers. Clearwater's so-called ownership traced back to a document that never should have been approved. The land was still legally held under a trust, created in 1952, never dissolved, never transferred. On paper, Miller's Hollow still belonged to the people. But Ranger didn't tell anyone. Not yet. He wanted them to finish. Every lost home, every manicured lawn, every gleaming window built on stolen soil. He wanted the arrogance to reach its peak before the fall. So the reapers stayed quiet. They rode through town, nodded to the construction crews, even bought them beers at the local bar. Everyone thought the bikers were just passing through, a rough-looking bunch with nothing to do. But behind the scenes, they were gathering evidence, building a case, and preparing for a day that would be talked about for years. When fall came, the subdivision was complete, 96 homes, all lined up in perfect rows, a monument to greed. Clearwater held an open house celebration. Politicians came, cameras flashed, and men in suits smiled for the evening news. The villagers stood behind the fences, watching their land being handed to strangers. That's when the sound of engines filled the air. Dozens of Harleys rolled down the main road, chrome glinting under the late afternoon sun. The road reapers rode 2 by 2, silent and steady, until they stopped in front of the newly built clubhouse. Ranger dismounted first, his boots crunching on the gravel. He walked past the crowd, ignoring the murmurs and security guards rushing toward him. "Can I help you, sir?" one of the HOA officials asked nervously. Ranger pulled a weathered folder from his vest and handed it over. "Yeah," he said. "You can give this to your lawyer." Inside was the original deed, notarized, signed, and sealed from 1952. The legal trust document that proved the villagers still own every inch of land under those 96 homes. By the time the case hit court, Clearwater's lawyers were scrambling. But the road reapers had already done their homework. They had witnesses, proof of forgery, and testimony from a retired clerk who remembered the trust creation. The bikers sat quietly in the back of the courtroom, leather vests gleaming under the fluorescent lights, while the developer's empire crumbled word by word. When the verdict came, the judge's gavel struck like thunder. The land belonged to the original families. Every house, every nail, every drop of sweat that went in construction now stood on property they did not own. Clearwater was ordered to vacate and compensate the villagers for damages and fraud. For the first time in a long time, Miller's Hollow had something to celebrate. That evening, the whole town gathered by the churchyard. Lanterns lit up the night. Children ran through fields that once seemed lost. Carl Jensen stood beside Ranger, tears in his eyes as he looked over the land his family had nearly lost. "You didn't have to do this," Carl said. Ranger shrugged, lighting a cigarette. "Maybe not. But when people forget who owns the dirt under their boots, someone's got to remind them." Carl smiled softly. "You remind me of my grandfather." "Then maybe he was one of us," Ranger replied. The reapers stayed until dawn, watching the villagers dance under the stars. They didn't take a dime for what they'd done. They never did. For them, justice wasn't about money. It was about balance. Weeks later, Clearwater tried to rebuild its reputation in another county, but their name was poison. The scandal had spread everywhere. Bikers saved village from HOA land grab. News anchors told the story with disbelief, but for the people of Miller's Hollow, it was real. And for the road reapers, it was just another chapter in a long road filled with righting wrongs the world had stopped caring about. Ranger never told anyone what he whispered before leaving town, standing at the edge of that field with the morning mist curling around his boots. But Carl Jensen overheard him. He said, "They built their dreams on someone else's grave. Now the land takes itself back." The roar of engines faded into the distance, but their legacy stayed behind. In the laughter of children playing on reclaimed soil, in the proud faces of families who knew they were home again, and in the quiet reminder that not all heroes wear badges or suits. Some ride steel and carry justice in their hearts. If you believe bikers can be heroes too, share this story.